The problem is when it's the only acceptable default setting. It's kind of like if people were robots and their default setting was to be submissive, quiet, obedient, and feminine. Those aren't bad traits, but when every woman is supposed to be that way, or if a male robot, their default settings was to be aggressive, masculine, strong, and like specific careers or interests, the problem is not every size fits everyone. Not every gender role fits the person. What about women who don't want to have kids, or men who prefer being a nurse over a doctor? Even though being a nurse is stereotypically, a woman is the first thought that comes into your mind when you think of a nurse. Historically, and even in the modern era, we haven't really changed much with the gender role expectations. There are diverse views with or without inclusion for non-heterosexual groups. It's important to recognize that not all Christians hold traditional views or values. There is a growing movement within Christianity that advocates for more inclusion and acceptance. However, this inclusion usually is not found in the more extreme versions of Christianity, more in the churches I deem fundamentalism. Baptists, Catholicism, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, extreme versions of Christianity. And they're not as inclusive as one might say. There are people in churches, even in the extreme conservative, high control religions, that are very accepting. I call them out-of-place Christians because their views don't match the denomination they're in, which is perfectly a valid way to live. I just think it'd be a little bit hard to be in a denomination that's very different from my point of view. So, in conclusion, while many churches uphold traditional views on sexuality and gender, there is an increasing diversity within Christianity. However, when people think of Christian values, they're usually not thinking of liberal Christians. I mean, it's okay to think that, but when you think of Christianity, the first thing that pops into my head are white people singing in a church. Very MAGA. And even though MAGA isn't a specific religious group, I would say the majority of people who identify as MAGA are fundamentalist religions. Now, you might be wondering, what does being cis and being heterosexual have to do with this? So cis, C-I-S, refers to a person who identifies or matches the gender or sex they were assigned at birth due to anatomy, genitalia, or social constructs of gender. So let's say a baby is born with very specific female genitalia, parts, and they fit mostly under the feminine gender. If for their life they identify as a female, that would be considered cis. If a male baby who is deemed male due to genitalia or other anatomy constructs, they would be called cis if they constantly after birth identify as male. Some people might say cis are the opposite of trans, where trans people don't identify as cis because they don't identify with the gender they were born with based on DNA or genitalia. But cis people are